Good afternoon and welcome back to another episode of A Better Jamaica's Sit Downs with the candidates from Council District 27 here in Queens. I am Gail Lewis, and it is my pleasure this afternoon to conduct this next interview with another candidate by the name of Leroy Gadsden. Good afternoon, Leroy Gadsden.
Good afternoon, and thank you all for having us. Thank you all for doing this.
It is our pleasure. So today, the focus of our interview is on you, the candidate, your story, your values, your background, and your vision for District 27. We will ask that you don't answer in sound bites or in bullet points, but instead tell us your story, okay?
I will try.
All right. And for fairness, we will call you candidate and your name so that no one has an unfair advantage over the next, okay? All right, so let's get started. Candidate Leroy Gadsden. Every good fairy tale starts with once upon a time, right? So I'd like to know, once upon a time, Leroy Gadsden, where were you born? Who were you born to? And how many brothers and sisters?
Okay. Once upon a time, in a little small country city called Bishopville, South Carolina, a little 3-stoplight town in South Carolina, I was born to my mother, Daisy and Richard, and I grew up basically with my grandmother because of poverty in those times. My mother left Bishopville to pursue employment in a bigger city, which is New York City. So I was brought up by my grandmother. I have one brother, and she raised the both of us, my grandmother, and taught me a lot of values in life. Grandmother was out of formal education because during her time, she was denied the opportunity. But I say this, and God bless her memory, she probably was the brightest and strongest and most intelligent woman I ever met in my life. And I've been all around the country, but grandmother knew about survival and succeed. And she made sure we got an education. I thought that was kind of unique. My grandmother could not read and write because when she was coming up, during the course of the year, she would have to stop and go and work in the fields. But she realized and recognized the importance of education. And one thing I learned at an early age in life, to be safe and healthy, I must get an education.
My grandmother. Stop you there real quick.
Okay.
Grandma's name, brother's name, and who's older, you or your brother?
My grandmother's name was Rebecca Reams. My brother is James Gadsden. He's older than me. He'll like to say he's a year and 5 months older than me. He's been saying it all his life. Well, yes.
And where is he? Does he live in New York or is he still
he's in Pennsylvania, and thanks to my grandmother and her strict hand, etc. He's a nurse. He's a licensed nurse, licensed practical. He's working out in Pennsylvania for the past almost 20 years. He's a Navy veteran. And so, so that all because of grandmother, that little old lady back in Bishopville, South Carolina.
And when did your grandma pass?
Oh, in fact, my first year of college, April, my spring semester, my first year in college, I was at an NAACP convention in Tennessee. And they came and got me, brought me back. I'm like, why are they bringing me back? They were saying we run out of money. They did not want me to drive from Tennessee back to South Carolina, knowing my grandmother passed. And when I got back home, one of my good friends, my returning brother, was at my house, my apartment on campus, waiting on me to give me the bad news. He was in my hometown.
Wow. So you filled in a lot of blanks there. So I'm going to go back and ask a lot of questions about that last sentence that you said. But before we get there, so your mom came to New York. Yes. And then when did you get here?
Okay. I came to New York. I used to come visit, but I came here officially 1991. I came here, I actually come visit as a child. I would take the Greyhound bus, etc., and visit. I'll spend summers up here in that country. But officially lived here, I came here really on a job pursuit. I was offered a position still in law enforcement. I was in law enforcement after coming out of college, and I was offered a position at Manhattan Psych Center, Wards Island, as director of their hospital police and safety. And so that was an offer I could not turn down, because when I was working in South Carolina, I was in law enforcement, but because I was against police brutality. So they needed me, but I was considered a danger and threat also, because they didn't know if they could trust me or not. I would pull police officers, black people, you can beat them up. I would stop that kind of stuff. So they tried to keep me happy, but there was a limit of promotion I could get at a young age. I realized that when the opportunity presented itself to be a director at a young age in New York State Office of Mental Health, I came running.
And
shock of my life.
And so you were here and your mom was here. Is your mom still with us?
No, my mother passed 6 years ago.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank
And
you.
she was in New York. Did you take her back down south to be interned, or is she here?
I took her back south. In fact, I got in trouble with some family
I'm sure.
because
I was just gonna. I
her.
know how that goes. So yeah.
Oh, good. I'm glad you know because she had family. We had family in Jersey, and they were saying,
Right.
but my mother had told me, her and my father, my stepfather, rather had a pact, and their
Right.
pact was whoever go first, the other
Mm-hmm.
would go to be with them when they pass, and that what they all discussed and talked about. So I was committed to that, and my father had passed, and my stepfather, rather, I call my father, he treated me like a father, and he passed first 3 years prior, and so we buried him in his hometown of St. Stephen, South Carolina. So I had to take my mother to St. Stephen, South Carolina, to be beside him.
Makes sense. All right. So so let's take a few steps back. High school. Where'd you go to high school, and what was your favorite subject?
Bishopville High School, and in high school, I think my favorite subject was civics, and we were teaching civics and politics. Those were my favorite subjects. I loved high school in Bishopville High School. Unfortunately, our school was out of 51 counties in South Carolina, we were ranked number 49 in education. So because I was in Lee County, very poor county. A lot of times our southern counties, what happened, most of them are occupied by farmers. So they make sure the tax base stay very low on that land. So there's very little tax to put into the public
So not a
education
lot of
system.
resources, right? So
Yes.
then you went on to college because I know that your grandmother instilled in you education. So you went on to college. Where'd you go to college, and what was your major?
Went to the University of South Carolina for my bachelor's, and I majored in criminal justice.
Okay. And you chose criminal justice. Why?
Well, I thought I'm fascinated with the law. And when I looked at the Constitution, I love the Constitution, I'm fascinated with the law. I want to be able to make sure those laws are applied. I've always had a passion also how we are treated as a people. I recognize the fact we need the law, we need the laws to be applied fairly. And I thought if I was part of the criminal justice system, I could help do that. And so as of high school, I went directly to criminal justice. I loved it as an undergraduate. I loved it with a passion.
And then after college, what was your first job?
My first job was with the Richland County. First, no, I did a 6-month stint with South Carolina Department of Youth Services. And from there, I went into the Richland County Sheriff's Department, where I worked X amount of years there. And I could bring my compassion for people in the law together, and I could basically put that on Front Street. And we were very successful. We had the highest clearance rate of felony warrants in the state. But I began to appreciate that when you respect people, you do your job differently. You do your job better when you respect people. You still put people in jail if they break the law. You hold them accountable. But if Junior violate the law, grandma or mama, uncle or cousin, they didn't violate the law. So why are we mistreating them? Junior have rights too, according to the Constitution. Let's arrest Junior without violating his constitutional rights. Let's do that. So that led me being very successful because people knew I would not abuse their relatives, their kinfolks. So they would call me up. Just not me. I worked with some great guys, some of the past. We worked with some great criminal justice professionals in law enforcement that I learned from, and they taught me, showed me how you could do this job. And they were black and white, wasn't just so they showed me you can do the job without being abusive to people.
Until how long were you in that position?
I stayed there for 6 years.
Okay. And then tell me about then you went on to law school. So tell me about what law school you went
No,
to, how long between undergrad and did you spend between when you finished undergrad and enrolling in law school, and where'd you go?
well, first of all, yes, after I completed my bachelor, I went for my master's, and I did that, and then I'm still working in law enforcement,
And what'd you get your master's in, and where'd you go?
criminal justice, University of South Carolina. And so then that when I got the offer to the New York position, so I made a tremendous mistake, I believe. I came and took that job, and I worked that position, other positions. I took me 10 years between graduation and going to law school, 10 years. And I would advise everyone not to do that. Keep it going, continue education as you go. But
Right.
nevertheless, I went to the Senate University of New York Law School, where it is a public interest law school. Great professors, great learning environment, loved every minute of it. It was
Awesome.
it was hard. Many
And
nights I didn't sleep.
what was your favorite class in law school?
You asking the tough questions. I think my favorite class, it might have been the constitutional class. And because that class also, we had to do legal internships. And that put me over in Brooklyn. They have a program over there. they had the dynamic Esmeralda Simmons and John Gibson, and they ran that program. And
What
they taught us.
what program was that in Brooklyn?
See, you're gonna get me in trouble. I forgot the name. It's a part of the Brooklyn. They still there, matter of fact, and they did interns, and it was like that was the cherished intern because you did actual legal work, and they taught you. I learned so much from them. We worked on class action lawsuits, et cetera, et cetera. We worked on cases. We did actual legal work in the intern process. But I think my constitutional class was my favorite class, constitutional law in law school. Once again, it re-emphasized what I was always believing, that how the Constitution is to be interpreted, how it is to be applied. And I discovered and I believe that somehow folks in America forget the fact that we are included in the Constitution too. But a mere fact, either we're born here or we were brought here, we still include in the Constitution. And if it's applied effectively as it's written, then I think we'll be treated better as a people.
And that's why you've got it over your left shoulder.
Yes, we the people. Yes.
We the people.
Yes.
So you've got the one sibling, your brother, who's the nurse, and and we know what you did through high school, and we know how you got to college, and then to your graduate degree, and then on to law school. So then you graduate law school, and where do you work after that?
After law school, I went to another dynamic job. I loved it. I went over to Rikers Island. I was a legal coordinator on Rikers Island. And I hope I don't get her in trouble, but my director was Miss Powell. And she was such a great person as a director. At Rikers Island, we saw the other side of the judiciary system. I had worked in it. I worked also in law enforcement. And I had been to the law school. But on Rikers Island, we were there reviewing cases of people that were arrested. And what always shocked me on Rikers Island, when we saw a Caucasian person, it was like, who mother did you kill? Rikers Island was full of people of color. I mean, and we started reviewing those cases, and that's why we were so advocate for bail reform, because there were so many young people coming to Rikers Island. And you look at their background, there was no alternative for them. And I'm not making excuses for them, but I think if we could have provided better alternatives, I think there were numerous cases where it looked like law enforcement looked for the first and the harshest charge they could, instead of giving them an opportunity to try to redeem or better themselves. The incarceration should be the last resort, not the first resort. And we have people at Rikers Island, we just review cases. In fact, we were cited by one of the judges, said that we were practicing law without a license. But there was a federal consent decree that Rikers Island, if you were arrested, they had to provide you with legal representation. But it was like, how much? The court never said. And so we would just pull cases out the file, look at all these violations people had, look at all these people, a lot of people were, I don't want to say con, they did not read or understand their rights. They were waiving their rights to a speedy grand jury.
Okay.
They were waiving their rights to a pretrial.
Like pleading instead of, or going for a charge instead of going to trial. Is that what you mean for the non-lawyers out here?
Okay, thank you. Let me try to clarify that. What happened when a person get arrested, the district attorney have 5 days to bring them for a grand jury to wait and see if there's enough evidence to, if it was proven at trial, it'd be enough to convict them in front of a jury. 5 days. If you do not, and that person cannot make bail, they can't get out of jail, they're here on a cash or surety, then at that point in time, that person must be released until their trial. And so what was happening, we had people that were just waiving their, when I say waive, they were giving up their right to the speedy grand jury. That means they can hold you for 45 days for trial if you waive your right to a speedy grand jury.
So they were waiving their rights. Did they know the consequence? Was that explained to them?
No, they did not know. And I mean, hundreds of cases, I know I picked the person, my colleagues over there, in every jail had a legal coordinator, and you would tell the person, oh, you were here now 2 weeks. They come down to the law library, you were here 2 weeks. We can help you file a motion to to release you for violation of your speedy grand jury rights. And, oh, okay, good, let's do that. And you open their folder, and maybe on page 8, they've signed a release of their right to a speedy grand jury. They did not know what they were signing.
Not realizing what they were signing or its consequences, right?
Yes, the repercussion for that. So my thing is, if there's enough probable cause to arrest somebody, then why we have to wait 4 or 5 weeks to determine whether the grand jury can review it? If there's not enough probable cause, do not arrest the person. And once I tell my criminal justice students, a criminal will always be a criminal. A thug going to be a thug. But if we arrest a person, let's do it by the law. Do not have people warehousing them in jails because they did not understand their rights, because you didn't have the evidence. And so eventually a lot of those people take pleas to crimes that they did not commit. but they're trying to get out of jail. Because if you were too poor to afford an attorney in 5 days of arrest, 40 days later, your situation have not changed. I mean, your family in the same situation.
You haven't hit the lotto. You're in
No.
jail, right? So you still can't afford it.
Still can't afford it. And I think when people talk about the Kalief Browder case, what we have failed to do is really look at what happened with Mr. Browder. If some of the Browders that I've seen in New York State, and not to be soft on crime, you steal my car, I want to arrest you. Let's just make that clear. But the law protects people who are innocent. There's so many Kalief Browders, by the grace of God, they didn't commit suicide, that was in jail. They took the plea. Mr. Browder said, I'm not taking a plea. Some people take a plea because after 12 months, their situation has not changed. They want to get out of jail. They don't take a plea because they're guilty. Yes, they're trying to get out of jail, but they don't see no relief in sight. And so when we look at Browder, it wasn't just Rikers Island. The entire system fails him and people like him when they're too poor and poverty-stricken.
Okay, so there's a lot there to unpack as well.
Okay.
So we're going to do that. But we want to just take a step back. So that was your job after college, and then, I'm sorry, after law school. And so what are you doing now? What's your job now?
Okay, and after that, I was, I've been civil rights all my life, so I got a job. I had a job with the state affirmative action, regional director for affirmative action, and where we look at position for Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 violations.
Was that with a particular agency or part of the state government?
It was New York State Office of Mental Health. I was the downstate regional director, where we handled not only race discrimination, but religion, culture, sexual harassment, pregnancy prevention. I was also the domestic violence liaison coordinator for the state, for that region, downstate region.
And then after that, you went on to?
I went to the college. I was teaching adjunct doing that, but then I received an opening offer to do the adjunct full time.
Nice. So you're full time where?
We just say with the City University of New York, put a period right there. Right. Okay.
Nice. And what do you teach? Criminal justice?
All your criminal justice courses, intro criminology, pre-law, legal courses, those kind of courses. Anything with criminal justice and the law and constitution, that's correction, juvenile, that's what we teach.
And your students want to go on to usually become attorneys or police officers or what?
A variety. Some want to be police officers, some want to be COs, some want to go, they want to go to FBI. I have a few want to go to attorneys. And so we try to push them and give them the basics, that commitment, dedication are the two main factors for either of those fields you're going to. And we had a big issue after, of course, when America went on fire after the Mr. Floyd killing. So what happened then was trying to convince, we got multi-minority students, that the best way to change our system is become involved. Because when you are behind the badge and your gun is in the holster on your hip, you can make a determination whether you're going to use lethal, deadly physical force, whether you can use humanistic tactics to arrest that person.
So, so right now you're a full-time teacher. Do you have a part-time job, or is that all that you're doing?
That's all I'm doing. I love it with a passion. I try to bring in my experience and try to help students understand the importance role they're doing. You know, it's an honor, I think, if you're going to be in any of the law enforcement, because really you're upholding the Constitution of the country. You take an oath. That's why I'm very disappointed with bad officers, because you tarnish the badge and the image for all the rest of the professionals out there. Once you rip that relationship between the police and the community, because you're a bad officer, then what happens, the good officers cannot do their job. And you look at the crime we have in our community, some of you guys, they rip that sheet of that relationship that we have. And when you do that, you makes it hard for everybody. You do not accomplish anything. And some guys really do not understand the oath. So I try to make sure in my teaching that those guys want to really be in correction, help them understand, you know, as they say, street, stay in your lane. If you're going to law enforcement, your lane is to arrest somebody and bring them before the courts. Once you do that, you finish. You're not the judge, jury, or executioner. All you're doing is making the arrest. A court will decide whether they're guilty or not. And once that's finished, then correction will carry out the sentence, not you. And we look at our kids in America, we have too many people fail to understand in this profession, stay in your lane.
Yeah, that is very important to drill down from the very beginning with like the most basic classes on up. So that's a beautiful thing. So you've talked a lot about criminal justice. You've talked a lot about racial justice, social justice. That seems to be a theme that you've got going on here over the last 20 minutes that we've been talking, which brings me to the question, how big a move does running for elected office represent?
To me, well, it's a highlight of trying to bring about change. All my life, I've every stage of my life, from my high school days until to the distant minute, I'm always trying to change and affect things around me. I have over 30 something years in NAACP, starting as a teenager, and we always try to fight change. So I've always wondered, why do America look the other way when it comes to us as a people? I've always asked myself those questions from a little child in Bishopville, South Carolina. I didn't understand it then, but it's always on my mind is that why is it that you can have these small jobs? Everybody's minority, they hired a white person, 6 weeks, she is the supervisor. Little small town. You go to the schools, get rid of the principal, once another one come in, they have all these people of color worked there for decades. Your mama knew about them. All of a sudden, they hire somebody. I was wondering, how can that be? So I've always tried to bring about change. I think at this stage in my life now, if I can get to city government, I can bring about a bigger change. I'm running on my record. As a change maker advocate in this community for the NAACP over the past couple of decades, I have advocated for change successfully. I know how to bring about change. My concern mostly too is the fact that our city government agencies that tax dollars, taxpayers pay their salary, they have failed Southeast Queens on every side. They failed. You have a job to do.
So
When
that actually, that brings me to a very good question right there. Since they have failed, let's say come November, it is now council member Leroy Gadsden. So let's say it's January, whatever, and you were just sworn in. You're council member Leroy Gadsden. What is the very first piece of legislation that you are going to put forth? What is the one you can't wait to get passed?
Well, one of the very things I want to work on is education. I want an MWBE, education. You said one, so they married. I think education that we have, we must put a moratorium on the schools to make sure that all our schools are properly funded, that we have undersized classes. If you look at the schools in Southeast Queens and people that graduate 20, 25 years ago, the school looks the same. I go upstate, and how can it be, all this money for lottery and lottos supposed to go to public education? I want to make sure it comes to Southeast Queens, especially in the 27th district, that we first in line. Our schools must improve. Part of that with education, I want to make sure that we have computer access to every student in my district, and that every student have a mandatory access to a second language. We're setting students up to fail. We let them graduate from high school, and they do not command a second language. America is becoming so diversified, every job is going to require a second language. So while we know this, we know how to build prison for our people. Let's know how to educate them so they can be employable on the market a few years from now. For education, I would also want to change,
when you said internet access, do you mean, or computer access, do you mean in the schools, out of the schools, both?
Well, I want us to have the funding in the schools. So if Johnny cannot afford it, first we want to have the schools wired to do that. And if Johnny cannot afford it, let's get Johnny a laptop. I'm in college and I'm amazed. And I love and respect the students. We have students in shelters, and look, they on their cell phone trying to learn. I respect them and their commitment, but I'm like, I want to try to at least level the playing field so that at an early age, if they don't, every school they come to, we can make sure that each one will have a computer, a laptop, and access in the school. So if they're going home without one, let's put one in their backpack so they can have that access, because that's where the world is at now.
And you said a moratorium on schools. Can you explain that?
Well, I want to max out the class size. Let's say if we have 40 people moving in the community, 40 students, and we have a classroom, which is now crazy with 28. I want to max out the classroom that under no circumstance can you put more than 18 students in the classroom. Because that little boy and the little girl in our community, he or she's he's a big boy or girl, let's say young person to high school, they're in a class with 28, 29 students even before the pandemic. They're at a disadvantage in the game of life when their counterpart in Lower Manhattan is in a classroom with 17 to 18 students. Even they hadn't started the game of life yet, they're already at a disadvantage. They're not playing on the fair. They don't have a chance. They're on a level playing field. Let's put it about on a level playing field. I want to max out. No, we're not going to force all these students into class. I want to make sure the teachers can put their attention to just the right amount of students. And I'm more concerned in 2022 because now I'm on this national committee. We look at reopening for education institutions and stuff. If we were overpopulated before the pandemic, all the recommendations that we should have classroom for learning remotely should be 15 and 16. So I want to make sure after the pandemic that we have all the benefit resources we need. We have to add additional classrooms, but I want the moratorium. We're not putting 30 students in one class. We're not putting 25 students in the class. That's the first piece of legislation. And I want to jump on the MWBE. I think that when we talk about the MWBE, minority women's business, what we have failed to understand is that it doesn't work for people of color. And, you know, nobody wishes to say that. It has good intentions. We worked with some of the groups and leaders and clergy in this community against the casino, and we were trying when they bring in Aqueduct, and we said MWBE in effect. We saw so many businesses that was going to happen is that white business owners were putting their business in the name of their wife. The wife couldn't spell construction. I'm not anti the wife now, you know, but it locked our people out. We did not get in the major contracts at that point in time. So we fought that. So I want the law to put in that you must have some of the biggest construction dealers, construction in New York City. I don't want to get you sued. So I'm not going to call their name. I don't want to get you and Mr. Mays sued. But let's say some of the biggest one in New York City, they do not comply because they do not have an auditor or compliance regulator on board. They're watching themselves. So I want to part that. That's why I had that one line that the city hired the person, but part of your contract, you pay for the person. So we can be a compliance monitor to make sure you hire minorities. Also to make sure you have the subcontract. Because if you're talking about a $20 million bond on a project, and listen, New York City is going up, you want a piece of that pie. And if you have a minority, especially Black-owned businesses, where you've been locked out the game for 80 years. Your mom and daddy was locked out the game. Your grandparents were locked out the game. How are you going to manage to get a $20 million bond? So we want to make sure there's bonding money aside so credible business can get the bond. Also, and the person who get it, then we should make sure there's a subcontract so they can get the bond also. So if you can't do the 20 million, give it to somebody with the 10 million.
Okay. And you said quite a bit in there. You mentioned that you were on a committee right now. Tell me about what committee that is. An education committee, I think it was, you said.
Well, it's okay. It's the Alpha of American Public Health COVID-19. And what we do is basically, I was on the safety committee at my college. And so all the colleges had to send somebody, well, you know, remotely. And it's natural, we started looking at reviewing ways, how can we safely reopen the college campuses? What are the recommendations? What's the best practices as far as being safe? That's the committee that we work on.
Thank you. So you're chomping at the bit. You can't wait first day to start start overhauling education in the district. And you're also interested in WMBEs, that kind of, I guess, changing or making them more minority friendly, for lack of a better word. Just very briefly, just naming them. Could you name the top 3 problems or issues in District 27 right now? Just name them, don't explain them.
Zoning, crime, and homeless shelters, the homeless situation.
So let's start with zoning. So that's the problem. So specifically, what's the problem and what is your solution?
Well, the problem is District 27 is residential. And what happened, we have developers that's violating all the zoning codes and building 3 and 4 and 5 family houses and stuff. When that happens, there's a failure of a city agency. As I said, that failure again, the building department, they are not enforcing the sanctions in our community. So people are building wide open. There's another agency, the Bureau of Standard and Appeal, and we testified before the agency when they tried to bring in the hotel at Conduit in Springfield. We fought them, and there was a double violation on the governmental part. The Bureau of Standard and Appeals was trying to give this person a variance so he could violate the zoning order to build this short sheet hotel across from a school and high school honor program in a residential neighborhood. Okay, now by law, he was supposed to stop building once we called him on it, and we joined Senator Sanders on that. And we joined on, he did his thing, the Senate in NACP. They're supposed to stop building. We had to put people across the fence and take pictures. Some of the photographers you know quite well. But nevertheless, the building department would not enforce the sanction. So we had to put pressure on them. You are paid to enforce the sanction. I think now with this new, they're trying to build this new zoning, this new ordinance in city council that where, you know, you can build multi-dwelling house in our community, in all residents community. I want to tag team with, if that thing get passed, let's tag team with all the elected officials in New York City that's going to be affected by that, because there's going to be a lot of them that's affected. Residential is going to destroy our infrastructure. You start putting on every block, you can put multi-family dwelling, you're going to destroy the infrastructure. Back to my education program, back to the sewer program, public transportation, all that's going to be destroyed because now you're going to almost like double the capacity of the neighborhood.
So first is zoning, the first problem, and you solve it by enforcing, I guess, the current laws. Is that right?
I think you can. You solve it by advising people who on the payroll at the taxpayer's expense. In my district 27, we pay some of the highest taxes. Let them know the people you pay tax for, we need you to enforce the law in that community. Okay. And help the people understand too. When you see people building these multi-development, gotta let my office know so we can be in the building department. Hey, look, give them the sanction, cite them, stop order, stop work order. We gotta make it less profitable to violate our rules and the norms of our community. We cannot let it be a profit issue.
Right. And so number 2 in your list of the 3 top issues or problems in District 27 was crime. So what's the problem and how do you solve it?
Well, it's not an easy solve for it like that, but let me say this though. And first of all, we have to repair the relationship between the police and the community. In doing that, we have to make sure we have a commissioner that understands and respect. I don't think this commissioner really understands what people of color goes through, okay? And when your police officer do things to further violate that relationship, you cannot pour gasoline on a fire. When your officers are breaking people's houses, you know, without a no-knock warrants and stuff, when you cannot call people that are protesting criminals and hoodlums. We know we have criminals protesting, but it does not sit well because you paint everybody with the same brush. You're the police commissioner. You're now giving your officers a green light to abuse those very same people, the righteous few. You give them the right to do that. And so I think the commissioner, first of all, must have an understanding or must be replaced that understand the people, right? And understand these things exist. And secondly, we have to work to make sure that we can hold officers accountable. People need to know if I'm abused by a police officer, something's gonna be done to that officer. It's not just a business as usual. This is why I have some people that are upset. Once we repair the relationship, people will feel, okay, let me call the police when they see somebody breaking in my neighbor's house. When I see a fool with a gun, I'm okay with calling the police. We have to work more on that. I think we have to bring in more diversity. I think the mayor has started that. He seemed to be on the right route. I was very disappointed. He seemed to be heading in the right direction. He peeping some of my platform stuff. But let me say this though, you know, we have these school agents. These guys interact with people every day without a gun. I want to make sure I put them on police departments so they can come in the community. They've been in all these years without a gun. Every 2 years, we need to exchange it. We talk about 2 years of college. You've been in the school safety for 2 years. Let's exchange the two, because if you look at those school safety officers, they look like the community that we police in. Let's bring those guys on board. They have a simple, they know about de-escalating. They know a simple tolerance and temperament. They can respect people. That's what we're gonna need. Once we repair that relationship, go ahead.
So you're saying to hire police officers from the school safety bucket?
Yes, I would love this. I would try to make that happen because those guys, they are diversified. Plus, they have learned how to deal with people. They in these schools dealing with violence every day. They're not shooting people, etc. They respect people. They're handling it. Now, I'm not saying they're all perfect. So when we deal with human beings, we're not going to find any perfect group of human beings. But we have a high probability of getting people that represent the community that they're going to serve in, that when dealing with this community, acting with that community, we have a greater probability of respect and trust. Great. Once we do that, if we can tear that down, we have to make it also opportunity, people that can feel comfortable reporting criminals. People know who the criminals are. We got this situation 4 Rockaway, and and we have to understand, help people in the community understand, if you feel so disconnected to our community, you would take a gun and shoot in somebody's house, you're not a part of our community. We can't protect you. We can't try to hide you. We must out you, and we must talk and tell everybody this is not how we have to live. You have people now afraid to go outside. It used to be at night. People afraid to go outside in the day now. And unfortunately, it got to be a recognition that we are a part of this. So half of that, we have to make sure that we put a relationship, people feel comfortable talking to the police. Secondly, we must talk to the police. This stuff about what snitches get stitches, that was created. You know, if I commit me and you rob a bank and you run faster than me, I'm not supposed to tell who you are. Where that come from? But now criminals have twisted this thing around, have people think if you talk to the police at all, you are a snitch. No, you're protecting your neighborhood.
So we got zoning, crime. Those are the top two. The third top problem in the district is homeless. What is it and how do we solve it?
Well, you know, the sad part about it, first of all, we have to recognize that for some reason, not some strange coincidence, we have the highest homeless population in shelters in New York City. That's the first thing. We must stop that. Secondly, we must make sure on the citywide level that we have places in, now heaven forbid, I'm not anti-homeless, because by the grace of God, I'm not homeless. Me or you could be homeless any day. So I'm not criticizing people for the situation that they're in, but first of all, we must treat people, and I said people, we must treat people like people. I would take the profit motivation out of the homeless situation. What has happened now in New York City? You know, all you have to do is have 4 walls and a roof and a toilet, and you can get up to $189 a night to house somebody. So you have hotels that they're being built in our communities. Then after they go up, we call them shelters. Hello, building department. They become shelters, and we put house and we pay people to put the homeless in there. They do not offer any services because they were a hotel. So at 8 o'clock in the morning, we throwing people out on the street. 6 o'clock in the evening, they can come back in. What will a grown man do? A woman too. You have all day long on the street. You see guys walking around with no shirt on. If the bathroom is a human function, we all gotta go to the bathroom sometime. If you can't go in your house in the shelter, where are you going? Behind your neighbor's bush, behind the car. You know, we have our family. We have taken these shelters and ruined our community. There's a better way. My thing is on that, we need to sit down. Let's find a place for the shelter. Before you receive one dime, let's make sure you're going to have services. So if somebody going to shelter today and they're down their luck because they lack whatever self-esteem, education, skills, and training, we should have a program in place so in 2 years or less, they can better themselves and come out. They can't better themselves if they're in a situation and they're down on their luck. They get kicked out in the morning at 8, let in back at 6 at night. How are they going to improve their skills? We should not be warehousing people for a profit for others so that they're being homeless all their life. I would stop that. If I had to lay down in front of the budget, we're not putting checks out for that anymore. Same thing too with the homeless, what we've done, we've taken the mental ill. Now here where it gets kind of tricky at. When I say government has failed the people, how you put all the shelters in Southeast Queens and put no resources in Southeast Queens. We have in Manhattan and the Bronx, people do not know about that. The city spent $100 million. They put a community mental health intervention center in Manhattan and one in the Bronx. Yes, see, people didn't know. But well, why don't we have a mental health intervention shelter? You're putting all the people in our community. I was coming here today trying to get on this, rush back to get this. Man walking around with no shirt on, talking to himself. This man should not be in a homeless shelter. It should be a mental health clinic we can take him to. So now when people call the police have no option but hello, the arrest. Hopefully it doesn't go south. So what I want to do is bring home a mental health intervention center to Southeast Queens. Let's find a place with the community leaders we can place that at. Secondly, Creedmoor is a state hospital. Creedmoor is practically empty. Let us negotiate with the state. Let's get that because, you know, and once again, I'm not criticizing being mental. That's a sickness. I work in mental facilities. But here's the thing, though. If you mentally ill, you do not need, it's dehumanizing. To me, it's inhumane to put a mentally ill person on the street and let them walk around getting hurt, intimidating the community, threatening people, talking to themselves. That's inhumane. Let's put them in a center someplace. They can get the help they need. They can get the medical treatment that they need and everything they need right there. Instead of they can get cleaned up, etc. Instead of letting them wander the street. So that I don't want to, instead of dumping them on my community, let's do the proper service for these people.
All right, so we are running out of time and I just have a few more questions. So let's get to them. Who knows you best, candidate Leroy Gadsden?
That's a good question. Who knows me best? I would think I have a very good friend, and friend is like, you know, we have those brothers and sisters and family relationships. I have a very good friend. She's like a sister to me. So she probably know me best.
What's her first name?
Angela.
Angela. Okay. So we're going to ask you to be Angela for a moment and tell us, Angela, what is candidate Leroy Gadsden's biggest strength? What would Angela say is your strength?
his compassion or his passion to help people.
Mm-hmm. And what would Angela say is your greatest weakness?
Sometimes he goes overboard. Once he gets stuck, he want to go all the way out. He, sometimes he does not look and see the odds are against you. That's his biggest weakness. I think she would say is that sometimes he doesn't realize you have to let it go sometime.
Right. And where in the district do you live? Just so people know.
I'm on the borderline between St. Albans and Springfield. I'm on the borderline.
Okay, cool. So which town are you in? Springfield.
St. Albans.
St. Albans. Okay, cool.
Near Jackson.
Oh, near Jack. Okay, St. Albans. Awesome. And so you, candidate Leroy Gadsden, let's say you're elected 4 years from now. How do we measure your progress?
Did I do what I said I was going to do? That's how you measure my progress. Did I do what I said I was going to do? Did I work to prepare the relationship between our community and the police? Did I put 4 years? Did I do something about the homeless situation? Did I do something to stop the shelters? Did I do something to make sure everybody come in this community, anything come in this community, that we have a cut of the pie? Did I do those things? That's what I want to measure by. Did I do anything about education? What did I do? I'm not talking about that we can have theory that I can, what it says back home, I can show you, but I can tell you, I want to be able to show you this is what Leroy Gadsden did with his 4 years as a city councilman.
Okay, and that's your measurement. Awesome. All right, so we've got 2 minutes left. So I'm going to give you the floor, candidate Leroy Gadsden, to make your case. Why should we of the 27th Council District vote for you?
Well, Sigmund Freud once said that, the sign of mental retardation, keep doing the same thing, expecting a different outcome. I want them to do something different. Vote for a man that's been a community activist, not a politician, that has spent over 20 years without being on anybody's payroll as a volunteer fighting for change in this community. Vote for the man who's not a nod your head, go along puppet, but a man who stood up for you over the years, who stood up against police brutality, testified at hearings on stop and frisk, testified at hearings on beating people upside the head, a man that fought developers when they tried to put the hotel in your community, the man that fought to get rid of the principals that was incompetent IS-8, the man who run his record, the fought to open up the Alpha Senior Citizen Center when the city closed that down, the man who fought to stop liquor stores from coming, fought the ABC Commission, Alcohol and Beverage Control Commission, the man that fought developers, they wanted to bring in a casino right next to your neighborhood without hiring you to work that casino. My thing is hire somebody who's a part of the people that are going to represent the people that will stand and fight for this community and make sure we are on the first in line of receiving benefits of services that we're entitled to as taxpayers.
Thank you, candidate Leroy Gadsden. Shout out your fraternity.
The first fraternity, first Black Greek known among Black men, the mighty Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated, 1906. We've been doing great things ever since. All great men may not be alphas, but all alphas are great men. Whenever we look at progress or success, you'll find an alpha man.
And did you pledged in undergrad?
Undergrad in South Carolina, undergrad, yes. We pledged before they did the intake, but we pledged undergrad South Carolina. Okay. It was quite interesting. We were a predominantly white school, and so all the predominantly Black schools were coming to make sure that we had an authentic pledge process.
We'll leave that there. We won't ask any further questions about that.
Thank you, kind. Thank you, kind. We loved every minute of it.
So you've been in the fold for quite some time, and yeah. Why did you choose that fraternity?
Because as I reviewed, Dr. King was an alpha man. When I looked on my campus, the alphas had what I thought I wanted to be a part of. The alphas were productive. And once again, I'm not criticizing any other fraternities, right, but I would tell everybody, join the fraternity, you can fit in that. I saw the alphas doing the thing. They seem to have a conscious of social awareness, and I wanted to be a part of that. So I thought I had something to offer. They had something to offer me. I thought we were blending quite well. And that's why I chose Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated.
And we've got 1 minute left. Okay. You are your first choice, obviously, I'm thinking, when you're ranking. Who's your second choice?
I'm not going to answer that question.
Okay, that's fair.
Thank you, Cam. But, this is my hour. I'm the star of the stage. I only want to talk about Leroy Gadsden. But let me say this. There's some great people running. I respect all my opponents. But I would ask people, look at the record. Who have worked for this community over the decades without being on anybody's payroll, without getting any paycheck, who have gone against the system time and time again to benefit the community. I want people to make their first choice based on that. And there's no one that has done more for this community of running than Leroy Gadsden. And if I'm wrong, somebody prove me wrong. That's all I tell them, prove me wrong. But I do respect everybody that's running. I have some great people that's running, good for our community. Yes, great people
running. We've got an embarrassment of riches this time around. It's a beautiful thing.
Yes, yeah, I agree with you 110%. It's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you, candidate Leroy Gadsden, for sitting down with A Better Jamaica today and just telling us a little bit more about who you are, your values, your background, and of course, your vision for District 27. So to everyone watching, thank you so much for taking the time out to sit with me as I sit with candidate Leroy Gadsden. And for everyone at A Better Jamaica, thank you so much for watching. I am Gail Lewis, and we will see you again here real soon. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having us. Thank you all for doing this.
Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.